Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to introduce to you guys my favorite art supplies. I am not sponsored, these are just my favorite supplies that I keep buying over and over again. I'm going to be as thorough as I can with the review and compare it to other products that I have used. And more information on the supplies and where I bought them will be linked below. First, I'm going to start with my favorite art journal. This is a Stillman & Birn Zeta series sketchbook. You'll see this on my Instagram all the time. And this is definitely my travel sketchbook. It's super light. It's a soft cover. This size is not quite an A6. It's a little smaller. This is their mixed media notebook, so it holds color pencil, watercolor, and ink really well. The pages are super thick, so you won't see shadowing on the other side. And if you want to prevent your artwork from transferring onto the other pages, I would suggest to put like a little piece of paper in between the pages when you draw. They have a few other series that I'd love to try. Currently, I only own their Zeta and Delta journal. This is also their Zeta journal, which is supposed to be a landscape format, but sometimes I use it as a portrait. I think it's amazing with watercolor. I think you have to keep in mind that this is a casual journal. It's a soft cover, so it will start looking rough over time. They do have hard covers. I just like soft covers because they're lighter. This is their Delta series sketchbook. It's almost A4 in size. I mainly use this to watercolor or paint in. The pages are super thick and durable. I like that the surface is a little rough and the color of these pages is actually ivory. So here's a comparison with my Zeta series journal. You can see that the Zeta series is very bright white compared to the Delta. And the surface of the Zeta series journal is super smooth. This is my Moleskine sketchbook. It's a hardbound. It has an elastic band, which makes it really convenient to take around and keep closed. This is a dry media sketchbook, so it doesn't handle wet media well. I've tried painting in it with gouache and the paper kind of wrinkles up. The paper is ivory colored. It's thinner than my Stillman & Birn journal. Of course, my Stillman & Birn journal is made for painting or wet media, so it is different. I think Moleskine does make a wet media journal, but I remember the size was too big and I wanted a mini journal. You know how much I love mini journals. Okay, now this is my favorite bullet journal. It is my Leuchtturm 1917 pocket size or A6 hardcover bullet journal. It has an elastic band that's nice because it keeps it all together. I like to be very ambitious with my bullet journals. Sometimes I paint in them. I like to use color pencil, ink pens, which is not what bullet journals are designed for. So I recommend a Leuchtturm because even though it doesn't handle watercolor super well, the pages will wrinkle a little bit. It has the least amount of shadowing in my opinion. I used a Moleskine journal last year and I felt that there was a lot more shadowing. So that's why I prefer the Leuchtturm 1917 notebook. Here you can see the pages will wrinkle a little bit if you full on try to watercolor in it. So I wouldn't recommend that. I would stick to pens and color pencil and maybe a little watercolor accent. And here are my two go-to journals. So you'll always see these on my Instagram. My Leuchtturm 1917 bullet journal and my Stillman & Birn art journal. Now let's go on to more watercolor paper. This is my all-time favorite watercolor paper. It's the Arches watercolor paper made in France. This is their hot press pad. The most important difference between the hot press and cold press watercolor paper is that hot press has a smoother grain, while cold press has more tooth. It has a rougher texture, and you can actually choose from a variety of textures. So you'll notice that the surface on this hot press watercolor paper is smooth. And as a cheaper alternative when I'm feeling less bougie, and not buying things from France, I use the hot press watercolor paper from Blix. It is just as nice in my opinion. The surface is just as smooth. When I say smooth, actually it still has like a tiny bit of texture, but it's very fine. And this is a watercolor block, so once you finish a painting, you just peel the top layer off. So you'll notice that this takes watercolor really well. You can see all the depths of the colors. And really quickly, I just wanted to show you what cold press watercolor paper looks like. You'll notice here the rougher texture on the surface of the paper. And I think depending on what you're painting, textured watercolor paper could be better. But if you're just starting off with watercolor and you don't want to spend a ton of money on watercolor paper, I would recommend Strathmore. Now let's move on to my favorite paints. So this is by far my favorite brand. It is Holbein's Watercolor and Gouache. It was made in Japan and it has the best pigment. It's super saturated, it's very opaque. I just love how rich the colors are, but it is also very expensive. So alternatively, I have other brands that I also like. I like Winsor Newton's watercolor. I even have their masking fluid, which is kind of like wax resist. And for traveling purposes, I really like Koi's watercolor. This kit has a lot of colors. It comes with a water brush, which is really nice. It's a really nice water brush actually. Winsor Newton also has a small travel size kit that I've owned, but the colors, there's not as many colors, and so you'll sometimes find that you're missing a specific color that you need, and then Koi has everything in between, so that's really nice. And these are my favorite color pencils. They are the Caran d'Ache Pablo pencils made in Switzerland. So here's a funny story. Actually, I hated color pencils, but one summer I decided that all I was going to bring on my trip was color pencil and a sketchbook, and I fell in love with these. So they're very soft to apply. They almost have a similar feel as pastels. The color is very vibrant, it's very saturated. They also come in so many colors, so that's really nice. I think that as an alternative, you could also use Prismacolor color pencils instead. They were my first color pencils and they're quite nice. However, Caran d'Ache is of course a step up. Now for brushes, I'm not gonna lie, I do not spend a lot of money on brushes. If I really like a certain brush size, I would buy a specific size brush from a brand that I like Princeton. I know that there are tons of other brands. There's Zen in here, but I actually use a lot of the round brushes from a really cheap Michaels brush set. Because I'm not a fine artist, there's only very specific size brushes that I like. They'll be listed below, and my paintings are usually very small scale, so I think I would pay more for the detail brushes and like the round size 1, size 5, and size 6. Now, sketch pencils that everyone should own are these Staedtler H pencils. On a scale from H to B, H is harder, so it sketches lighter, and then B is softer, so it's more for shading. I also have their pencil sharpener and their eraser, and also another German company is Faber-Castell, and I only own their kneaded eraser, but I know their products are really amazing. I just haven't tried them yet. Next, my micron pens. So I'm sure everyone owns these. I have the 005, 02, 05, and 08. Those are my favorite sizes. I usually use my micron pens to ink with, and also I use it to journal with. Barely ever smears unless I was super fast at smearing it. And also you can ink over it or watercolor over it and it won't smear or bleed. And sometimes I use my Tombow pens to highlight over it and it will not smear on my journal. I know everyone uses these Tombow pens to do calligraphy with. I don't really do calligraphy. I just own them because I like the pretty colors. But it's a dual tip, so that's really cool. Sometimes I use the brush and sometimes I use the smaller tip. Just don't mess up the brush tip because, yeah, they're expensive. Now, if you're looking for a new ruler, I got you. This is the best ruler. So this is the Westcott ruler. I own it in the 18-inch and the 6-inch, but basically you can see all your measurements that you need. It's translucent, and I used it when I was making patterns in fashion school, but I think it's an amazing ruler. And they're not expensive. So I've owned so many of these and broke so many too, but I keep buying them. Lastly, I just want to show you guys my iPad Pro. So I use the Apple Pen and my Procreate to draw a lot of the stickers that you see in my shop. I used to watercolor and draw them by hand, but I discovered that Procreate has a lot of amazing brushes that can really mimic traditional media. So it's not the same. I wouldn't replace traditional media completely because I love it too much, but going digital does have its perks. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this was informative, and you can check the links below for products that I've mentioned or talked about. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks.